I'll go ahead and get started. I'm Sara Jo. I work for Ecology Bridge, which is a consulting company locally here, but I also help run what's called the Summit CWMA. It's a cooperative weed management area, and these associations are typically made, they're all across the country, and they're typically made up of like government agencies, nonprofits, local businesses like myself, and residents, HOAs. And we all kind of come together to just try and address noxious weed problems. And we try and educate the public about integrative weed management. And when I say integrative, it's exactly what it sounds like. We're integrating all the methods that we can think of in the appropriate combination for each species at each site as best we can. I say the as best we can because our partners control thousands and thousands of acres. If we could hand pull every biennial plant that's a weed, we would totally do it. But we cannot get the budget to do something like that. So we've got to balance what's logistically feasible and what's effective with what we wish we could do as often as possible. So I'm here today, people are like, why would you have weeds at a Firewise event? Weeds actually increase fire risk. If you're watching in Southern California, you've probably heard about the grass problems that they have there. The annual grasses, cheatgrass is the biggest one. We do have cheatgrass here. Unfortunately, it is moving in. We don't have a great control for cheatgrass. We're trying a lot of different methods, but it moves so fast. It's really hard to control. That is literally the only reason it's not on our noxious weed list, because we can't tell people they have to legally control it if we don't even know how to do it. So it'd be good to learn about what it is, and if it's moving into your property, control it. But other than that, there's not a whole lot we can do. The reason that it's problematic though in the areas that it has established is in Southern California, those shrublands, they typically would just burn in little patches. If you look at a natural shrubland, you'll notice that there's shrubs, but in between the shrubs, there's often a lot of bare ground. And as time has changed, these grasses have moved in and they've filled in all that bare ground. In the past, that bare ground prevented fire from going very far. So a fire would start, a patch would burn. And then another year later, another patch would burn. And we have this little mosaic of areas that are at different life stages, more or less likely to burn. But now, with the grass, it's filled in those spaces. So as soon as a fire starts, the grass carries the fire further and increases the chance that a fire will start. Because grasses, let's face it, are just more likely to burn. They're dry. They start on fire easier than a shrub would. And so we're seeing with these annual grasses like cheatgrass that they increase how often we have fire, the size of fire. But then after fire, it gets worse because annual grass is one of the first things to come up. So it competes with all the natives. It steals the nitrogen and all of the soil moisture in the top couple of inches of soil, preventing reestablishment of native plants. So now you have even more of this grass. It's even more flammable, and it'll carry that fire to new areas. So we don't have that happening much here yet. Let's cross our fingers. Maybe we'll find the silver bullet for cheatgrass. Not holding my breath. But around here, what we have is garlic mustard. And if you've seen it, it's this sweet plant with this really cute white flower. And often when you don't know what it is, you think, I'm so lucky. This is covering the ground. It's beautiful. If I crush it, it smells like garlic. It's wonderful. It's destroying your soil the whole time that it's growing there. Unfortunately, there are a handful of noxious weeds that put chemicals directly in the soil purposefully in order to inhibit other plants from growing. Garlic mustard also does something that very few of the noxious weeds do, but it puts chemicals in the soil that suppresses our natural fungus and bacteria in the soil. And if you know anything about microbial communities, as they call them, or the soil microbes, the fungus and the bacteria, they're incredibly important for our native plants. Trees especially rely very heavily on them. If you think about how big roots are, they can get to a point where they're pretty small, but that costs the plant a lot to build. A fungus, however, it's kind of the mycelium, which is sort of their equivalent of a root. is so much tinier, and it doesn't cost very much to build. And so if you think about how fast those mycelium or roots can move through the soil, the fungus can get farther into the soil super fast. It can shut down a whole area if it's hit something it doesn't want to be around or doesn't have enough water, and quickly change directions. Roots can't do that. And so when we're dealing with issues like drought, as we have been, those fungus are super important to the health of our plants, and that's especially true with all of our evergreen plants. So what we're facing now in the area of wildfire is that we have these carpets. If you've gone up to the mailboxes up here and gotten on the trail there, we've had carpets of garlic mustard. And the trees that are in those areas are just not as healthy as they could be. So if you combine drought and potential for beetle kill, we're looking at a real risk of increased tree death. And of course, as we all know, the more tree death that we have, the more likely we're going to have fire carry. And I live in Summit Park. I also have garlic mustard in my yard. I always like to tell people that because some people come to me and they're like, I feel really bad. I'm kind of ashamed. I have like literally an acre of garlic mustard. Like they've got this really shameful disease, but we all have it. So nobody ever needs to worry about coming and asking for help with these noxious weeds. It's a huge problem that people really just don't understand the depth of the problem for our ecosystems as a whole. So moving on from fire, there's other reasons that noxious weeds are a problem. And a lot of times people want to know, what is a weed versus a noxious weed? What makes it so much more important? Well, a weed is just a plant that's out of place. Well, that's pretty subjective. You could just decide anything, like dandelions. I don't think they're a weed. The bees need them. But I also don't have a lawn, so other people prefer to kill them. Noxious weeds, on the other hand, the state, the feds, the county, if we were in a city like Park City, each of those governments have the ability to identify and list a plant species for a couple of reasons. One, it has an impact on agriculture. So if it's substantially impacting or has the potential, because it has somewhere else, impacted agricultural production, whether that be in crops or impacting cattle, it can be listed as a noxious weed. If it has some sort of massive impact on natural resources, often what we're talking about there is that it's changed how much soil is exposed and we get increased erosion. Or like garlic mustard, changing the soils, increasing fire risk. Or if it is one plant that replaces everything, now anything that needed special plants that grew here that were native as a food source has lost their food source. And this is a real problem for our pollinator species right now. You know, a lot of people see musk thistle and they see the bees on them and they think, oh, this is great. Why are we killing these thistles? The bees want them. One, new research is showing that the nourishment that they get from the noxious weeds isn't the same as what they get from their native plants. And so they're just not as healthy because they're not getting everything that they need. But the bigger issue is that if you look at, say, when this turns white over here next to the grocery store, if it just goes white for 3 weeks and then all the flowers are gone, what's there for the pollinators? Nothing. In a natural habitat, you'll have different flowers blooming starting in May all the way into October. And if we don't have that continuous bloom throughout the season, our pollinators are at significant risk. And so controlling noxious weeds is important for everything from the smallest of bees to cattle to elk and to us and our homes. Another issue would be now we think about recreation as well. Utah makes a lot of money off recreation. And so if there are species that are changing that experience for people, they can be deemed noxious weeds. They're already listed. It's thistle. Who likes to bike through musk thistle and get it wrapped around your handle or run across your hand? Nobody likes it, right? And so that can be another reason. And then the last reason is for health, public health and animal health. We only have 3 populations of something called star thistle in this county. Star thistle is very well known in California. The thorns can easily reach 2 to 3 inches, and it can cause something that's called chewing disease in horses and cattle. And it can get up into their mouths, and it can prevent them from being able to eat properly. It can get in the hoofs of animals. It can frequently get in the eyes of especially dogs, because let's face it, they'll shove their face in anything if there's something they want down there. So it can cause damage to animals that don't know better. And then there's things like myrtle spurge, which I know we have here in Pine Brook. So if you don't know what it is, let's make sure you know what it is before you leave. It produces a chemical. If you break its leaf, it looks like milk is seeping out of the leaf. That's actually a latex combination of chemicals, and it can burn the skin. Kids are especially sensitive. It can actually put them in the emergency room. We had a whole troop of Girl Scouts end up in the hospital 2 summers ago because they showed up to do a weed pull in Salt Lake and didn't bring gloves. It can have blisters all over, burns that last for days. Some people aren't impacted. I'm one of those lucky few, but I don't test it. I still use my gloves. So there are some species that literally cause health concerns for people. So that's why a species is listed noxious weeds. It's not because we've decided that we don't like it. There are a lot of weeds that are just as invasive and can do damage, but they're not on the list because either they don't pose a big enough threat, or like cheatgrass, we don't know how to control it. If it's a noxious weed in your state, in your county, by law, on your property, you have to control it. If you don't control it and you get reported, the county can come in and they can, first they'll warn you, they can fine you, and then if you still don't take care of it, they can hire a contractor, whoever's available, at any rate, and then charge you for that. If you don't pay it, you're like, there's no teeth here, who's gonna make me pay it? That becomes a lien on your property, so you will pay it at some point. The county doesn't like to go that route here. They would prefer to educate you and assist you, and I think that that's great, but you do have to recognize that it is your legal responsibility to control noxious weeds on any property that you own. And so if we list something, we list it because we know it's important and we know there's a potential to actually be able to successfully control it. The only other thing I can say is the Summit CWMA has a lot of programs going on here. We're very lucky. The state loves us. We give them reports that make them look good every year, so they just keep giving us money. We have 2 grants for garlic mustard that we got last year that run until the end of June, and then we just got renewed for the next cycle of state funding. So that goes June to July every year. Kind of a weird way to pay for weeds, but it works out. So for that, we are able to provide assistance with the control of garlic mustard. We also have grant for knapweed and star thistle. This year we added Phragmites, which is a giant grass that you'll see in waterways. That one is one that it can take over a whole lake and change the ecosystem, and the amount of water it can go through is just devastating. And it is fire. It very likely will burn if given an opportunity, and it produces like just so much leaf matter that accumulates, so it would burn hot for a while. So we'll be controlling that, and then we also are able to control until the end of June myrtle spurge, leafy spurge, and yellow star thistle, or yellow star thistle and yellow toadflax. So that's a whole long list of things, and I can write it down for anybody. Or you can just visit summitcwma.org. You have to type it in. I don't know why the website's not coming up properly. The state set it up, so I'll harass them to fix it. But we do have our programs listed. We also have a lot of information on how to identify plants, where to go to get help. Our county weed supervisor's always happy to come out or send his enforcement guy out. And I say enforcement, but don't worry, he's really more education. He's a really great guy. They're all very, very nice. You can find that information there. You can find a link to sign up to the program if you have garlic mustard or knapweed. They are common in this neighborhood. I also have an iPad you can sign up today. What we do to control, we try as much as possible for garlic mustard to come in and hand weed a little bit first, because garlic mustard tends to grow in 2 layers at all times. So if I spray a really dense layer on top, I'm only getting this top stuff. then you're going to just have this grow up. So we haven't like interrupted the cycle really at all. So we try and go in and we thin that top layer. We don't pull it all, we just thin it, and then we come in and we spray the herbicide so that we can at once take care of 2 rounds of germination with 1 treatment series. So we'll do that as much as possible, but hand pulling is expensive, so they only give us so much money to do that. In order to try and get it done across more acreage, we created a new game. It's called Garlic Mustard Games. If you heard of it last year, the year before it was called the Armstrong Challenge. In this game, we have the whole county looking for garlic mustard. Anyone can participate. You create your teams. We have at least 7 already set up weed pull events, but you can pull anywhere. And the people who pull the most garlic mustard get invited to a free food truck party in September. But in between, at each of those events, we also have raffles. And most likely, if you have not met Ashley Caldwell yet, our local aerial gold medalist, she is last year's champion. So there's a very good chance that you will be pulling weeds with Olympic champions. She does want to be our spokesperson this year, so hopefully you'll get a chance to meet her. But we will hold them regularly. That's on our website. You can just show up. We'll have bags. I would say bring gloves. We usually only pull for a couple of hours, but in some places where it's really dense, it's a huge dent that we can make in a couple of hours. You want to pull on your own, you can reach out to us and we'll weigh your weeds, or if you can weigh them, we can log in. On our website, we're going to have a dashboard. We can track who's winning. You can see who you're competing against. And in the end, we'll list all of the champions. And we continue to work with all of the local vendors. Like Dickens is one of our big sponsors. They love to give us stuff for our mountain bike riders. Can't remember who else. I think Kate's Bars, if anybody eats Kate's Bars, they're like the best biking bars out there. We're getting a bunch of that kind of stuff free. So it's just a lot of fun. If you want to get involved, please do contact us. Go online. I have my cards up here. If you have questions about whether you have a weed in your yard and how to deal with it, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to our county weed supervisor, Dave Bingham, on the county weed site. We're always happy to come out and help out as best we can. So that, I think, is all I have. I could talk for hours. But I don't want people to get too bored about weeds, because they're pretty exciting to deal with. Does anyone have questions? No? Okay. Thank you. Feel free to come look at these too. I would love to educate.